This is an interview with Mrs. Bella Ben Oni. The family name was Tuman. Today is April 29th, 1998. I'm John Kent. We are in San Diego, California, and we're doing this in English.
When I was 10, originally my parents had a farm near Ternopil. It was an extremely loving family. We were always during vacations, we were spending all mother sisters used to spend vacation together with the kids, either at the grandparents' home and later in our home. If the war wouldn't have started, I would have been a veterinarian. Since, that happened once when one of my beloved horses died. And then I decided that when I would be a veterinarian, they are not going to die anymore on me. And my father also insisted that I will learn all the trades on the farm. So I really knew how to milk cows, how to cut corn, how to assemble the hay. I mean, I just knew everything. And that really proved very prophesizing, because that helped me, that really saved my life during the war. On September 1st, the war broke out. The German airplanes started to fly over us, and they, since we were like 4 miles to the nearest train station and railroads, they started to bomb them. We were hiding in a small canyon, which was really surrounded by tall linden trees. 2 days later, those two couples that I mentioned before that were friendly with my parents came from Lubachov to our farm. And we decided that we are going to leave the farm and go into the direction of Romania, and then cross the border and leave for Israel, without any money and without anything, but still that was the plan, the initial plan. On the 9th of September, we took some food and 3 pair of horses, and after a few days, we arrived in Ternopil. In Ternopil, we parted from our friends. They decided to go towards the Romanian border, and my parents decided to stay in Ternopil with my uncles and aunts from my father's side, my father's brothers, and also Rosh Hashanah, the New Year was approaching. So, we thought that the Poles will be able to sustain, the war, and to bring the Germans back to Germany.
How come your parents decided to go to Israel if they believed that the Poles could protect Poland?
That was, I think, my father was dreaming about going to Israel and establishing a farm there. And since we left, since we left the farm, that was timing. You know, what we couldn't do, like sell out everything and go with some money to Israel, we decided to go anyway.
At that point, was there a sense of danger to the Jewish people in particular?
I mean, there was anti-Semitism. We didn't feel it, but there was. I remember the director of the gymnasium was making fun of my Jewish friends whose Polish wasn't very, very clear. You know, so there was anti-Semitism.
Do you know if your parents had any legal way of leaving Poland? Was it necessary to have passports or visas or anything like that? Or were you all trying to escape?
At that point, probably you needed some legal papers. We were not, I know that my father did have a passport, but I don't think that any of us had a passport. And there was no legal way that you could go to Israel. But what we thought, that because of the war, they will be letting people in to, at that time it was Palestine. And it was under the English rule.
And how did you feel about leaving Poland?
Absolutely nothing. I mean, you know, wherever your parents tell you to go, you just go. In 1939, the Germans made an agreement with the Russians that they are going to divide Poland. And Russia will take eastern Poland, and western Poland was to be under the German rule. The Russians came in September, I think.
Which side was Tarnopol on?
Tarnopol was on the Russian side.
Okay.
It was in eastern Poland. They were very friendly, very limited in education. I mean, that's what was our impression. Trying to be very helpful. I knew Ukrainian. We start. In the first place, I decided to continue the studies and go to the university and, you know, to a veterinarian school. I went to Lvov. That was the nearest university. I passed the exams, and then I was notified that I won't be able to continue the studies because my parents had a farm and they were exploiting people. I came back to Ternopil. We needed some means to live. My father started to work, but that wasn't enough, and for me not being able to go to school, I needed to work. I found a job in the railroad station as a some sort of in the office. I knew Ukrainian, and the transfer from Ukrainian to Russian was very easy for me. And besides that, apparently, I was very able in humanistic studies. So I was learning languages very easily. And in no time, I knew Russian. After 2 or 3 months, they left. They were transferred to another town, and my father knew somebody who was the head bookkeeper of a mill in Ternopil. He took me into the office, and I was supposed to help out. After a few weeks, the Russians sent in an instructor to instruct us how to keep the books of the mill. At that point, they incorporated another mill, which was also not far from Ternopil. So we needed to keep books for 2 mills. The head bookkeeper was an older man who knew Polish and Yiddish, but Russian was in no way for him to comprehend. So the instructor decided that he's going to train only me. And then when he went back, he suggested that they are going to take me for 1 year to Lviv to teach me bookkeeping and administration.
Just one question before we continue. What happened to your family's plans to go to Romania and then to Israel?
Our friends came back because the border was closed. Romania didn't let anybody in.
Okay.
Okay, so that took care of that. I went for that year to Lvov. It was a very, very hard year. We studied 8 hours. We were working in the office 8 hours. And on Sundays, that was the day off, we were we were doing some public work. We were cleaning the streets, cleaning parks, working in gardens. I mean, we didn't have a second time during that year. After a year, I came back, the chief bookkeeper of those 2 mills, and I was there until the war broke out between Russia and Germany. That was, I think, June 21, 41. During that pogrom, 6,000 men were killed in Ternopil. And one of my uncles got killed too. One of those evenings, we were sitting at my uncle's house, and the Germans were coming. I was sitting in the kitchen. There was a bedroom, and then there was a living room. The men were sitting and playing cards in the living room. There was my father, my uncle, and my cousin. Maybe there was somebody else, but I really don't remember. I recall those three men. My cousin was still a young kid. And while we were, all the 10 men went in to the, when they came in, they asked, where are the men? And we said, you know, they are in that room. So all of them went to that room and started a conversation with my father. My father went to school in Austria, and he lived many years there, so he was fluent in German. And during that time, one of the soldiers came out and shined a flashlight on me because, you know, it was still the war going on between Russia and Germany, and we were not supposed to have any lights on. And I was crying. And he asked me, why are you crying? I knew German very well at that point too. And I said, because I know when you are, after you leave, I won't have a father and won't have, the men will be gone. And he, you know, I was young and with blue eyes and blonde hair, and I apparently reminded him of someone of his family. And he patted my hair and said, don't worry, nothing is going to happen to your man. And he went in to the room and said, Kameraden comes. You know, he wanted them out. And they started to object to it, but he was apparently the commander, and he just took them out. I can tell you, I can still hear, they had those shoes with nails in. You know, when I concentrate, I still can hear those steps in the hall and in the house when they came in. So at that point, my father was safe, and my uncle. But another uncle got killed in that. It wasn't action, it was really a pogrom. The next day, they were the Germans were taking women and young girls to work. My mother was taken to the jail to wash the dead. The Russians apparently killed all the prisoners in the jail before they left. And what the Germans said, that pogrom that they did was in retaliation for that Russian killing. After that, we were cleaning some houses for the German officers to live in. They were houses that probably or people evacuated or I just don't know from where, or they just came in and said that and that and that is going to be our house and you just move out. I don't know if they were Jewish houses. They apparently were Jewish houses that we cleaned. After that job finished, I got a job with Schutzpolizei, also cleaning for them. They were Germans, very, very nice. They were very nice to me. They used to give me, by that point, we already lived in a ghetto. Yeah, in September 41, we moved to the ghetto. The life in ghetto was horrible. We lived in very small places. There were usually 2-3 families in a one-bedroom apartment. We moved in with my other uncle. They had the bedroom and we had the kitchen. The ghetto started to be surrounded with barbed wires. We had Jewish police in the ghetto. And in the morning, at that point, they were not groups yet. When you had Arbeitspass, it was some sort of identification that you were working. You were able to leave the ghetto and come back. And it didn't have to be at a certain time. And I started to work for also some Schutzpolizei, but in a private home. They were very unpleasant, very demanding, very anti-Semitic. At one point, one of the guys wanted to start some love with me, and I said to him, you know, I'm going to report you because that's Judenschande. They were not supposed to have any relationship with Jews. So that really got him back. I didn't see him after that. He never came home. Apparently, he said maybe to those other guys that he lived with. There was no food in that house. There was work. I mean,
was this in the ghetto or outside?
It was outside.
So you had one of those passes?
I had, yeah, I had that pass or that ID or whatever it was called. Yeah.
Can you talk a little more about the ghetto, how it was set up, who was operating it?
There was a Judenrat. There was some elders who were supposed to take from the Germans. The Germans were telling them what they are supposed to do with us, and they were transferring it to the Jews. My father was approached to be one of those Judenraters, and he declined. He didn't want to. He preferred to work as a laborer, you know, some construction job, than to be, you know, to be a policeman over Jews.
At the time, what did you believe was going on? In other words, why were you all put into a ghetto?
I mean, we knew that that they don't mean well. We still didn't know how bad it's going to be, and at that point we already gave to the Germans all the fares and all the gold. We couldn't have radios. I mean, we were treated like cattle. After that encounter with that German policeman, that my father decided that I would be better off in another place. And there was an Arbeitslager. It's a working camp near Ternopil. It was probably about 4 miles from Ternopil. Somehow I was drafted there. You know, I think that it was my father's doing, and I went to that Berezovica. In the beginning, I was working in the fields with everybody else from sunrise to sunset. We slept in barracks. I don't remember how we were getting washed. There was a latrine outside. After a while, my father bribed that manager of that Arbeitslager. I think he gave him a watch. And I was transferred. I was in charge of the geese. So they had probably, I don't know, 200 or 250 geese. So I was bringing them to get some fresh grass. And I was watching them. I was supposed to prepare food for them and feed them, and when they laid eggs, to get the eggs. But I was freer. And the pasture that I was bringing them was near the village. And I got to know the villagers. I started to help them to do some mending and to do some work that I could do while I was watching the geese.
What was the attitude of the villagers about the ghetto situation?
They felt very bad about it. About the ghetto, I don't know, because they used to go to the ghetto in exchange for beautiful clothes for bread and milk, you know, so I think that they probably were feeling fine. I met a family, and after a while I found out that he really got my father's suit, that the son got my father's suit that they bought, you know, for some exchange. Okay?
No, keep going. We have another minute.
Okay. And that family started to be very friendly to me and started to bring me some work that I could do while I was weiding the geese, and I got from them food, which I could bring to my parents.
Up to that point, were you aware of any kind of underground efforts going on,
No.
false identification, anything at
No.
all like that?
No, no,
Did you ever try to get false papers
no, later on,
later? Okay.
yeah.
Okay, continue in.
I used to go try to make once a week a trip to my parents and my sister to the ghetto. I used to remove my how you call it, Magen David.
The arm
We used to
armband?
armband, and I used to walk towards the ghetto Ternopil.
How did you feel having that yellow
You
star
were
on-
branded, and that.
What was your attitude about having to wear that?
I mean, you know, you were just. I think that bringing us to the ghetto and putting us together with so many people, they just killed the identity of us. We were just not individuals anymore. When I used to come closer to the ghetto, I used to put on the armband, crawl under the barbed wire, get to my parents' place where they lived, bring the food, and early in the morning I used to head back to Berezovica. That happened a few times until one day I came home, and during the night the Germans started an action. That was already the second action for my sister, and my father, and my mother. They already were taken in a previous one in August, and they were able to come back to the ghetto. They jumped the train and they were able to come back to the ghetto. In that action, we were taken, my father, my sister, and I, and we covered my mother, and she was, no, my mother was also, yeah, all of us, all four of us were taken from the attic down. There was Jewish police with German police who came to take us. We were led to the trains. We were beaten on the way with sticks. We were led to a place near the train station, which was which was probably in a walking, I mean, we were walking in 4 or 5s in groups, and the German soldiers were around us. I just cannot understand. There were usually not too many German soldiers, that nobody really tried to overpower them. You know, they were like 3 or 4 German soldiers. We could have overpowered them. But I think that that diminishing what they did of us, they took all the initiative out. We were there for about 14 hours with no food and no water. I remember that when we were taken during the action, my father already knew that we need to take some food with us, and I think we did have some bread, which we shared with people who were around us. I mean, it wasn't that we had loaves of bread, but we probably had a few slices of bread. And I wanted to mention, at that point in the ghetto, I mean, we were getting some rations which were extremely meager. There was hunger. People were dying. People who didn't have what to exchange, like clothes for food, were dying from hunger in the streets.
What was it like for you to see death like that?
I mean, it was, you know, you just said, and, you know, and you just continue, and you knew that your time is probably coming too. But we tried to stay alive. Father told us to pick up some pieces of iron on the railroad because we would need that to be able to open the trains. How do you call it? Train...
Windows?
No, they didn't have windows. No, but what we did, they didn't have... It wasn't very hard. I remember I was doing it with a piece of iron from the... you know, you just could... when you digged into it, they were probably not very sturdy. So you could really make a hole pretty easy. And what we decided at that place where we were kept together, that since one of our friends, those 2 dentists, were in Ghetto Lvov and were writing to us the situation was much better there, we decided that when we do jump out from the train, all of us are going to try to go to Ghetto Lvov to meet with those friends. And we decided that we are going all meet there if we jump and if we survive the jump. I jumped one of the first people from the train.
How fast was the train going?
The trains were going extremely fast. The Germans were on top of the train, how you call those, wagons? Yes, and they were shooting. But, you know, we did know that we are going really to be killed in Belzec. At that point we knew because there were some previous actions where people went and nobody came back.
What did you know about that particular
We
destination?
only knew that they gas them in chambers, and then they burn them.
How did this information get back to you?
We don't know. We don't know. It's that information somehow arrived. We didn't have newspapers, and I don't think that the Germans were writing it in the newspapers. We did have from time to time some announcements from the Judenrat, which came in some pieces of paper, you know, what we are supposed to do and what we are not supposed to do. By that time, the ghetto was already much, much smaller, since they took so many people out in previous actions.
Did your parents and sister also jump?
Yes. Everybody, they jumped the second time. My sister said, okay, that apparently she doesn't remember that they jumped the third time. But I jumped from the train, and I did hear shooting. I fell on on the railroad. There were some stones. I fell on some stones, and the next time I know, I was awakened in a barn of some people. Apparently, I slept like for 2 hours, completely unconscious. They fed me. I told them that I'm Jewish. They said that there are a lot of people who are jumping, and some of them are being killed because they were shooting all the time. And after a day being in that barn, I started to remember, and I decided to go in the direction to Ghetto Lvov. How long it took me to walk, I don't know. I think those people gave me some food for the trip, and I was walking. At night, I probably slept in the forest. I tried to go through the forest to avoid the Germans. The Germans were afraid of the forests. I think that the resistance started all to build at that point.
Were you traveling alone then? Or
alone, just
So
alone.
Where was your family then?
I hope that when I come to Lvov, my family will be there.
I see.
You know, we decided that that's what we are going to do. I came, I was walking, and I don't know how long, and then suddenly I saw some lights. And there were from another lights near Lvov was a Jewish camp for working people, and it was in Zimna Voda. I went there. I waited until the group. At that point, you could only enter the ghetto or the Arbeits lager camp only in groups. So I waited until a group came in. I swung with them into that ghetto.
You mentioned something funny the other day about the walking stick.
Oh.
Remember that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I decided not to be alone, and so my father told us to take a hat because they are going to beat us up during the action. So I had a hat, and I put that hat on that walking stick, and I used to look at it and say, oh, they are two, we are two, I am not alone. That's also something that's a survival from the farm. And I also was very well, I had a very good orientation of the sun. I knew in which direction, if they told me that I am supposed to go north, I knew in which direction I was going, and that made it much easier because I was going towards Lvov.
That Jewish camp that you referred to a couple of minutes ago,
Zimna voda.
What was the purpose of that, or what were they doing?
They had working people concentrated there. They lived there, and in the morning they were going out to work. They said that, I remember I wanted really to stay there like another day, and they said it's very dangerous. During daytime they come in and they see if there are not some sick people, or the German police was coming in to check that everybody went to work. So they decided that I really need to live with them in the morning.
What did you find in the ghetto when you got back?
I didn't get back to the ghetto. I got somehow to the, after that first jump, I got somehow to near ghetto Lvov. I wasn't wearing an armband because I lost it in all the, you know, when I jump out. And I approached a Jewish woman to ask her, where is the ghetto Lvov? An Ukrainian policeman stopped me and said, why are you talking to a Jewish woman? The Gentiles were not supposed to have any contact with the Jews. And I said to him, I am Jewish too. So he said, okay, if you are Jewish, we go to the Gestapo. Okay, we went to the Gestapo. I was interrogated by the Germans, and they tried to talk me out of it that I am not Jewish. And I said, they probably knew how bad it is to be a Jew. I still wanted to have my people around. They put me, after, you know, I convinced them that I am Jewish, they put me into jail. they were talking about two options. Either they are going to bring us near Lvov to a place where they are going to shoot us and put us in a common grave, or they are going to take us to Belzec, to those gas chambers. And I told them that when we are going to go to that shooting place, I don't think that we have a lot of chances to run away, because they put you on big trucks, covered trucks, and there is a lot of German police going. We saw those trucks before going probably in Ternopil. I saw it. And there was not too much chance to survive. But I told them, if we are going to be taken to Belzec, what we need to do is to break out again from those train wagons, and that we should pick up the iron and be able to get it, to be able to make some holes, to be able to jump out. My friend and her mother said that they are not going to jump because they can break a leg, or they can be killed. So I said to them, you are going to be killed anyway. They never jumped. I did jump out when we were brought to the train, and at that point I survived, and that was the time when I went to the Zimna Voda. At Zimna Voda, the Jews gave me the exact directions how to go to the ghetto. I didn't have any problems to find it. And this time I waited also until the group started to come back from work. And I came to the ghetto and I found my parents' friends.
Briefly, when you were on the train and making the opening to jump out, what did the others say? Was there any decision going on?
Some people decided that they will try to break out. Some people were so disgusted with life that they didn't care. They were like in apathy. The life in that cell was horrible. We were like 20 or 23 people, I think, in a room. There was hardly, we really couldn't even sit down with stretched out feet. I did tell everybody to try and save some rations of that bread that we used to get, that we will have it on the way to Belzec, that we will have something to eat, that we won't be starving. And
did anybody else jump, as far as you know?
I don't know. I do hope that some people jumped and some people survived. I know that I was the only one, to my knowledge, who... I mean, the train was really moving extremely fast. So if somebody jumped 2 minutes after me, they were probably a mile away. So it wasn't that you could really meet some people who jumped out of the train. I came to Ghetto Lvov. The friends received from my parents a postcard that they were back in Ghetto Tarnopol. So I knew that they were alive. That was really the last communication that I had, because after that they didn't allow any mail to go from ghetto to ghetto. The friends got me a false card, a false W-2, which meant that you were working. And I went out with the group to work. That was an electric company, and I was cleaning the windows and the halls there. At one point I got injured, and I needed surgery, and after that I was transferred to work in the kitchen, because with that hand I couldn't, my thumb is still sore. I mean, that surgery was without any anesthesia done, but he did a good job and he cleaned it out. It was a big infection. I started to work in the kitchen, and I got some quarters with other 4 women that was already called, not the ghetto, but it was already called Arbeitslager. It means working camp. I lived with 4 other women in a very tiny room. Both my neighbors on the bed had typhoid fever. How I didn't contract it, I don't know, but I didn't. At that point, we had some showers, and we could shower, and we could wash our clothes. I mean, it was really a luxury in that place. Coming back from work at one evening, we saw 12 Jewish policemen hanging from the electricity and telephone poles.
Okay.
It was a horrible sight. What they wanted to tell us that sure enough, to get our hopes even more down, and to tell us that if you don't obey, that's what's going to be your destiny. If we could have done it to the policemen, we can do it to you too. While I was working, I met a Ukrainian chauffeur who told me that that he is ready to help me to leave the ghetto if I would get myself some false identity. We were paid for work something, and apparently, and maybe my parents' friends gave me some money. I was able to obtain a false birth certificate. That chauffeur took me at one point to take some pictures because everybody needed to have a kennekarte, that was some sort of identification. And with the birth certificate and with the picture, you could obtain such identification. He told me also to bring out some clothes from the ghetto, and he took it. And apparently his wife was transporting some Jews to Częstochowa, which was in western Poland. And apparently there Jews, according to her, Jews lived freely, and they were able to work, or they were drafted to go to Germany to work as Gentiles.
Did you have a false name then also?
Yeah, I had a false name. And
what was your name?
Janina Solak. I continue to be in the ghetto. One day I had an encounter going to work. I had an encounter with Eichmann, Adolf Eichmann. We were going to work, and they were taking out all the women from the groups and putting them at the ghetto border. And sure enough, we knew that that's something that that they are not going to come back from there. We were in the group 4 women, but 2 of them decided not to go and stay in the ghetto and hide somewhere. I decided to go because I had enough of that fantastic life. And so was also a woman whom I befriended, Carola. Don't remember her last name. When we came, Carola was much older than I was. When we came to the gate, Eichmann was there with 2 other policemen. He told us to step out from the group. We did. And he asked the group manager to tell what we are doing. And we said that we are cooking for all those men. There was a group, I don't know, of 30 or 40 men. And he told the other woman to step out and go aside. I was looking him straight in the eyes with no fear. I don't know what made Eichmann say, "Die eine soll sie gehen." This one should go. And I was the only woman who went through that gate and survived. And I remember I was very, very famous in the ghetto. People came in the evening to look at me, you know, what I did and, you know, how did I survive. I continued to work there, and I was working in the kitchen. And one day, sometimes in June, that Ukrainian man came over and said, "Tonight you are not going back to the ghetto." And he was a chauffeur who was working with the Germans. And he knew about that they are planning really to completely liquidate the ghetto. And that night really was the last action of the ghetto. I stayed with that family for about a week. The family had a 7-year-old son. I remember I wasn't going out, and they started to fear, because to conceal a Jew meant death, not only for the Jew, but also for the whole family. And when they started to be uncomfortable, I decided that I am not going to be the one who is going to jeopardize their lives. They told me that there is a black market, that people go somewhere outside Lvov, and I should go really to the train station, and there I can meet some people, and we can go and buy flour, bring flour back. And I really met there some people. I don't know if I had some money from the ghetto, or those people gave me some money. I don't know. But I had some clothes, and the clothes that I brought out from the ghetto before, I took that, and I had some money, and I just joined a group of 2 or 3 young people, and we were going together to the villages. We slept one night in the barn there. The next morning we took a train or afternoon to Lvov. We brought the flour, and there were people who already were waiting for us to come on the train. And we sold it, the flour, and I slept the next night in the train station, which was pretty safe, because I had no place where to go. That went on probably for 2-3 weeks. When I went to the village, I had some food, and I was bringing some food to have in the train station. I survived very well. In the village, I was able to wash up. After a few weeks, the group of mine decided that they can sell the flour for much more money if they are going to bring it to Lvov, not to sell it in the station to those middlemen. Sure enough, I gave them my flour, and they were supposed to come next day for the next train with the money to come back and go back to the village. The next morning they didn't show up. They did give me the address where they lived. I went there. Nobody was there. I don't know if it was a false address or they just knew that I am going to look for them. I was in despair. I was sitting on the curb of the street, very disappointed, very disillusioned, and somebody approached me. Why are you so sad? Apparently I was also crying. And what can he do for me? That was a man probably in his early 30s. And I said, one thing you can do, you can just notify the Gestapo that I am Jewish and you found me, and and they will already finish me off. And he said to me, I really don't want to talk with you here. Why don't we go to my office, which is nearby? I have a sandwich there. First you eat something, and then we are going to talk. And he gave me a sandwich and, I don't know, some water or, I don't know, something to drink. And he started to ask me about my life before and where I am from, and during that conversation, he said, I was telling them that we had a very good relationship with the people who worked for my father, and we decided that I should really head towards the farm, my parents' farm. He gave me some money, and I got myself somehow to the train station.
Do you remember the name of this man, by the way?
Never got his name. You know that I don't remember the name of that Ukrainian family who helped me. It was something that people just wanted to help. Some people wanted to see you dead, but some people just wanted to help. I came to the train station and I saw a girl from my high school who was a year ahead of time in school. I didn't approach her because I didn't want to jeopardize her. I knew that she knew that I was Jewish, but she approached me and she said, okay, I'm going home too. And home was somewhere, my home was like the farm was like 2 or 3 stations before she was coming out. At that point, I had those photographs and I had that false birth certificate on me. 2 Ukrainian policemen started to be interested in us and came over and talked with us on the train. They were usually, looking for, I don't know, or for Jews, or I don't know. They were just looking for someone. And my friend said to me, I think that they might be suspicious of something. Why don't you, they left us, and they said that they are going to come back. She said, why don't you just go out on the next station? Which I did. I mean, I came out from the train and I came to Horenets. In Horinets, I found out that a friend of my parents, who was a doctor, is still practicing their medicine and was working for the Germans. Sure enough, I went there to see him. He was petrified to see me. He was afraid that if they catch me, they catch him and his family. And he gave me some money and told me to go and rent a room somewhere. At that point, an aunt whom I loved very much, with whom I stayed 1 year in Przemyśl when I went to Hebrew school, Aunt Hanya came to me in my dream and said to me, you will need, whenever I will come in the dream to you, you will need to leave the place immediately. I stayed there for a few days, and I was dreaming about Aunt Hanya. I just packed up my things and I was going. There was a holiday, and people from the farm came to the to church, and while I knew the way very well from Horinets to the farm, and while I was walking, I just met them. They were extremely happy to see me, and sure enough, they took me home to the farm. They lived in those barracks that I told you, or whatever it was called. There was that housing for people who worked on the farm. They took me there, and they decided that they are going to hide me in the attic. The entrance to the attic was really from all the four apartments or whatever. So when they were hiding me, they were afraid that somebody else will find out that they are hiding me. I was staying there the whole day. It was unbearably hot. But in the evening, I used to go down, I used to wash up, eat and sleep in a bed, and in the morning I was going again to that place. And since I didn't want to jeopardize nobody's life, I decided to leave. And I'm walking, and a man with a pair of horses on a carriage stopped me. Where are you walking? I had sure clothes from the city, not peasants' clothes. Somebody in the carriage stopped and said, "You are Bella." I said, "Yes." He said, "Here I have your picture." He took it out from his pocket. He said, "What are you doing here?" He was the administrator of a few neighboring farms. And I told him, and he said, "You know, the neighbors from your farm are looking for some help at home." So I went there, and I got a job as a helper. They had a small farm. They had 2 cows and some chickens and a small house, and we were very friendly. I mean, The woman saw that I wasn't just a regular maid, and at one point we started to talk, and I told her who I was. And her husband was Ukrainian. She had a new husband. And at one point he became suspicious and decided to call to that place from where my birth certificate was. And he called, sure enough, and he found out that that it was a false birth certificate, that girl whose birth certificate I had was dead. I mean, that was a good birth certificate, but the girl was dead. So she came to me with crying. She said, you know, you need to leave. So, fine. I left. I walked again, and then somebody in a carriage is approaching me again. And who was he? He was the manager of all those alcohol factories. I told him that I am looking for a job. Oh, he said, oh, okay, I know a family who live near Yavorov. They have a little girl, and you could go there. They are working for, looking for some help at home. While I was there was, in the nearest village, there was an office where you could get those German identification cards. I mean, I was still Polish, but you could get a German identification card. I decided to go there to that office, and I met there a young man, and we started to talk, and then I brought my pictures and my birth certificate, and we started the process of doing that ID card. And one day that the owner used to come every 2 weeks to pick up the butter and see what's going on the farm. And one day he came and he said to me, I dreamt last night about you, that you are Jewish. And I said, you know what, you must be Jewish. And I said, I am not going to work here anymore. If you think I am Jewish, I am not going to work. And so I stayed probably for another day or two there. I went to that guy, to that young guy, because he was telling me that he lives somewhere else and he goes for the weekends home. And I came to him and I said, you know, I just terminated my work because my boss wasn't very nice to me. And he said to me, you know what, you could really come to that village where I live. I know a woman who is renting some rooms. I said, fine. So before the weekend, I took my belongings and I went with him to that, to his, I don't know, did I tell you that it was called Szkło Starzyska? I think I did tell you. Szkło Starzyska at one point. Yeah. I went there and I stayed with that woman. I didn't know how I am going to pay her, how I am going, but you know, you just don't worry about those things. I mean, she lived from that she was renting those rooms. That was her income. And after 2 or 3, that village was extremely poor. When I came there, they had barely something to eat. And after like 2 days, somebody came and said that there was a big farm nearby that the Germans were occupying, and they said if somebody would write letters to them, they are going to distribute some corn, and then they can make flour and have bread. Okay, there was no problem for me. I sat down, wrote a few letters, whoever came. The peasants brought me potatoes and chickens and eggs. I mean, I could pay that woman, you know, for my staying there. The next weekend that Ivan, you know, that guy who brought me to that came home for the weekend, and he said that they came from the farm to look for him because he wrote those letters, and they want that person who wrote the letters. So he went there and he said he didn't write the letters, but there is somebody else who wrote the letters. So they invited me there. I came there, I got a job on the spot. And I was working in the office. I had no problem with food. I had no problem. They probably paid me some money too, I can imagine. I had access to radio. I was sitting in an office and was a big shot. And was talking, and the German police was coming and going, and you know, and I was very, you know, very relaxed about it, and I wasn't afraid. I mean, I had my story. I stick to that story, and that was it.
Up to that point, did you know what had been happening to your family in the previous couple of years?
Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. It only when I was alone and was able to sit and contemplate and think, you know, whenever I was crying, and I started to cry after my sister and my father, I could never cry. My tears used to dry up. But when I was thinking about my mother, I mean, the tears were running down. And one day, the Germans came at night and knocked on my window and said that they are leaving and they are ready to take me with them. And I said, no, thanks a lot. I am waiting because my parents might be coming back from Siberia. I needed to have a story all the time. They told me, you know, that for a while there is going to be here no government, and you know what's happening. The Poles are going to kill the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians are going to kill the Poles. I said, fine, but I will take that chance, and I will wait, you know, maybe my parents are going to come back. For a few days, I was really living and sleeping in the fields. Why? Because, you know, I was just afraid that somebody will come and kill me. I also had an encounter with that woman where I lived. At one point, she said to that friend of mine, she said, she must be Jewish. She has very bright eyes. And I remember I said to her, you know, like the Poles were doing, she must be Jewish. you know, and I needed to stay there. I had no other place where to go. I mean, I continued to stay there. The fields that I was staying, I was eating, you know, I was really familiar with that, what you can eat. For a few days, I really ate some grass and, you know, there's some edible, growth, you know. So I could live on it, you know. That's how I survived in all those trips, because I knew what you could eat in the forest and what you couldn't. And I heard, after a few days, I heard a commotion on the road. And I went out, and they were Russians. They were Russian convoys going west. I just put my hand up, and they took me on a truck, and I went towards Ternopil. I mean, somehow I probably transferred from that transport to another one. There was absolutely no problem. The Russian soldiers fed me. I mean, it was, you know, I spoke Russian, so it was, you could communicate, and, you know, and I knew about everybody's, you know, from where they came and how many brothers and sisters they had, and, you know, I mean, you had conversations. And I came to Ternopil, and I decided to go to that mill where I worked for 2 years. I came there, and I met the man who was running the mill. And he recognized me. He said, "Oh, good that you are here. Your father and sister were here a few weeks ago." Ternopil was liberated like 3 months before I was liberated. And I told them that you are alive. That somebody saw you in Krakow. Nobody saw me in Krakow because I was never there, but that's what he told them. So they at that point knew that somebody saw me already after the war, that I was alive. And I asked him, he was Polish, and I asked him, how do I find my father and sister? And he said, go, there is a Jewish community here. Go there, and they will know where you can find them. I went there. There was a synagogue. It was a big room. And I needed to wait until the evening, because when the people came to pray, you know, nobody was there before. And they told me, yeah, they know that my father is like 15 or 20 miles from there in a small town. And you couldn't go at night, because at night you were not supposed to move. You know, there was the war zone. So the next morning I got up and I went, sure enough, hitchhiked again and went to Zbarash. And I went there, and I asked someone, and they told me, oh, your father and sister live right here. I went into that shack. I mean, I was really, it was horrible, you know, in what conditions they lived. They slept on straw. They didn't have anything to cover it. I mean, it was so primitive, you know, that I don't think that during all the time what I went through, that I lived like that. And sure enough, the doors were completely open. The whole room was big, probably like that piece of that dining room. And I said, "Where are they?" So they said, "Oh, they probably went to the market, because that's how Father was supporting them. He was buying from the peasants some vegetables and then selling them." I went in the direction of the market, and I see somebody in front of me. That was my sister. And she said, let me go and tell Father slowly, because Father had an accident and he has temperature and he feels very bad, and I am afraid, that it's going to be to a big shock to him. So after a few minutes, she waved to me, and I went to see my father. I mean, I don't know how I looked, but they looked awful. I really had quite a few good months, staying on that German farm. I had food and clothing, and I was fine. And we came home. Father had high temperature. He had an abscess, which I knew how to cure. I went to the fields, got some sort of growth, brought it, that took out all the pus, and Father got better. His temperature went down, like in 2 days. After a few days, my cousin, who left Poland as a komsomol, she was in the that was a youth organization in Poland. How do you say it? It was pro-Soviet one. She went, when the Russians left in 1941, she left with them, because they knew that the Germans are going to kill those youngsters. My father, though, was very, very sick. And he lost a tremendous amount of blood during that accident. And my cousin brought a doctor from that police, and he gave my father some injections. What the injections were, I don't know, but they put my father on his feet back. Father was lying, I mean, really motionless. On May, I think 5th, the 45, the war was over. I remember our manager called us to the office, and everybody needed to have a glass of vodka. Everybody needed to drink that glass of vodka. I mean, that was, you know, that was celebrating that the war was over. I mean, the Russians knew how to drink. I didn't know how to drink. I mean, so I was sick after that for probably 2 days. And I was a manager of the accounting office, just a big shot. And at that point, people started to register to go back to Poland. And I remember father was talking to me, we need to register and go back to Poland. My sister was going to a Russian school while I was working. Father opened some sort of a deli, and he was working there. And I was telling my supervisor that my father wants me to leave Russia and go to Poland. And I remember the supervisor came once home and spoke to my father and said, you know, where is she going to get such a position? And I mean, why would you take her from here? And your other daughter can go to school and study, and you know, there is, I mean, you can have a fantastic life here. And one day, that was January 30th, 1946, at night, father was talking to me and said, you know, tomorrow is the last day that we can register. He said, do you want to live here? What kind of a life you have? You are working like a dog. You have absolutely no social life. And what future do you have here? And I said, okay, you go and register us. And father registered us. We probably, maybe a month later, we went to Poland. I felt horrible in Poland after the war. For some reason, whoever I sat down on the bus to talk to, everybody was anti-Semitic and against Jews. I mean, I don't know why they found me to talk about that, but that's what happened. And at that point, I felt that I really don't want to stay in Poland. So we were probably like 4 or 5 weeks in Poland, and we left for Vienna. It was
You
nice.
haven't referred to your mother in a while. Was she still with the family at that point, or
No.
what had happened?
No. My mother was not alive. My mother was killed during an action she was taken out during an action in 1943. She was hiding, and my father and my sister were taken out before her. They left her in the attic when they left, and she she was taken and going to such a mass grave, you know, where they were shooting people and covering the graves. And my uncle, who was at that point alive, wanted her to flee with him, and she said, you know, I have nobody to live for. My husband and my daughter were taken in that previous action, and you know, and nobody did. There were really the last actions. The ghetto was completely, I mean, it was minute. And my other daughter is not alive. I have no reason to be alive. And my mother was killed. I went to that mass grave, just didn't feel anything. There, I mean, you know, I just didn't feel, I couldn't go where the mass grave was, because when we planned a trip to Poland, I was okay, and then I had a month before we left, I had knee surgery, and I still didn't recuperate completely from it. And we needed to go through a very uneven road, and I couldn't really make that road. But they put up a table, you know, that there is the mass grave, and I stood there and I said, no, the mass grave must be somewhere else. I just didn't feel that I was on that grave. My daughter and my sister went there. I couldn't. I started to work for DP office. By that time, I knew Russian, and I knew German, and I knew Polish. I mean, you know, I knew Latin. I mean, I was fine. In that office, I met my future husband, who was a Zionist, and he was preparing to have a talk to the displaced people about going to Israel. After like 3 months, we were going out. I met all his friends, and he was called to go to Paris. And I said, fine, you go to Paris, you come back, you know, we continue our friendship or whatever. And he said, no, I am not going to leave you here. You come with me. And he made arrangements, and we were going together. Okay, we got married, I mean, one evening. You know, nothing big, nothing fancy. There was a long time in my life when I didn't want to talk about that. And to talk about the Holocaust. And that was because I was having dreams at night, and I was getting up and screaming, and I really wasn't able to lead a normal life. At one point I decided I have to get rid of it. And that was to convince myself that that was a dream, that was a bad dream, that I didn't go through all of that. And I was able to convince myself, and I really wasn't able to talk about that until we went in 1995 to Poland and visited Auschwitz. When we visited Auschwitz, I decided I didn't go through that. And future generations should know what happened to millions of people, innocent people. Thank you.